Welcome to Puro Politics, the political podcast of the San Antonio Express News. My name is Gilbert Garcia, Metro columnist, and I'm joined by
City Hall reporter Joshua Fechter,
investigative reporter Brian Chasnoff.
And we're 6 weeks away from the beginning of early voting in Texas. And in San Antonio, there's a particular interest in the three big proposition votes that are going to go before voters, which are there's a connection between all three of them, but they all have their separate campaigns. And the one that I think we've probably been talking about the most recently has been the mayor's proposition calling for 4 years and roughly $150 million for workforce development, using 1/8 of a cent sales tax to fund that. And Josh, you recently wrote about the fact that the mayor has put together a team to try to win this campaign, and it's a pretty stellar group of local political operatives that are all kind of coming together on this one campaign.
Yeah, it's pretty stacked. You have basically a trio of co-chairs on this campaign, which I should note is now called Build SA. He's put this team together. He's got three co-chairs: Blakely Fernandez, who is a former Alamo Colleges trustee. She's also a partner at the law firm Bracewell. Linda Chavez Thompson, formerly of the AFL-CIO. She also used to be on the VIA board.
Ran for Sonia governor a few years back too, yeah.
Right, and Sonia Rodriguez is part of the team. She's part of Cops Metro, the local grassroots organization. He's also got Rebecca Cedillo, who's a former CEO of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. He's tapped Jorge Irby as his campaign manager for the push, and he has advised Beto O'Rourke and Julian Castro, and the big hitter I think is Gilberto Ocañas, who's a former deputy executive director of the DNC, longtime Democratic operative. He's the campaign's chairman. Most recently, he ran basically this dark money group that helped Henry Cuellar fend off a primary challenge in March. So I mean, he's bringing in like this pretty stacked team. And
Gilberto is basically the guy that he has really taken over political work for the mayor himself. Yes. He'll probably be the main guy when we get to the 2021 mayoral campaign.
Correct. He's no longer with Kelton Morgan, who was kind of his longtime campaign manager. Earlier this year, the two of them parted ways, and Gilberto Ocañas has basically stepped into that role.
You've also got Ryan Garcia, who I think came in kind of late in the process for the mayor last year, like during the runoff, and it was I think he does various things, but I think he's been known to, for his field work. And I think he was helpful in what was a really close mayoral race. And what's his role going to be in this?
He is going to be deputy campaign manager. He's previously managed campaigns for County Commissioner Justin Rodriguez, Sheriff Javier Salazar. Then Nuremberg also brought on James Aldrete. He basically worked media for the Obama and Hillary Clinton presidential campaigns. In this capacity, he's going to be more of a consultant. So, I mean, you've got this team that's being put together sort of, when I reported on it, it was about, closer to 8 weeks out. We're about 6 weeks out now from the start of early voting. So that's not a lot of time to get this message out there and sort of organize this push. So, I mean, they've got a steep hill to climb.
They got to raise money, which I think they're going to be able to do. I think they've got business support on this, but the big challenge with this and every campaign that we're looking at is they can't do traditional block walking, or at least much of it. My sense is, and I don't know what your reporting uncovered on this, but my sense is that they're going to have to do a lot of phone banking, probably a lot of Zoom conferences and various things like that. I mean, what are you hearing about how they're going to approach the campaign?
So you know what Jorge Irby said, and I apologize, Jorge, if I'm mispronouncing your last name. I've never actually had to pronounce it out loud.
You got it.
But so far, like, you're gonna have to, and all campaigns are basically having to figure this out. And what Jorge Irby told me was that they're gonna have to basically pump a lot of money into digital ads, TV, radio, other platforms. So far, they still don't have a website or social media presence. I double checked this morning. I didn't find anything. So if that's out there, please let me know. But that's something that they have not yet put together. And with the other two campaigns, with Pre-K for SA, with the VIA push, that's already up and running. People are already familiar with those things, even if say the VIA push had to basically be restarted over the summer. That's been in the public eye for a while. So it's they're starting way behind.
Right. We've talked about the VIA campaign is being run by Kelton Morgan, who used to be the campaign manager for Mayor Nuremberg. He's working with Laura Barberena, who's a Democratic political consultant. The VIA campaign, which I think we've all agreed is the one that probably has the best chance of winning. I meant the Pre-K for SA campaign, I think, has the best chance of winning because this is basically asking people to continue funding something that has been in place for 8 years, and I think most people would say has been pretty successful. And that campaign is being run by Trish DeBerry and the DeBerry Group, and of course, Trish DeBerry is running for county commissioner right now. So, is there someone who is kind of overseeing all three campaigns, kind of trying to coordinate the idea that voters should vote yes, yes, yes on these three?
So Gilberto Ocañas and former Mayor Henry Cisneros are they're, and I need to check on the progress of this, but last I heard, they're trying to basically put together this sort of superstructure, which is what it was described to me as basically something that's sort of like an umbrella over all three campaigns to basically coordinate sort of a vote yes message. A couple of weeks ago, Henry Cisneros was saying that he's gotten quite a few community leaders to basically form this structure and to go out and be sort of the face of it, though he wasn't ready to announce them at that time. But they want all three of these to pass, obviously.
Yeah, sure.
And before there was nobody sort of coordinating that message. And there are kind of mixed feelings about whether that's sort of the wise track to go down. Mm-hmm. Because mostly, you're talking about yet another sort of fundraising apparatus, and we are in a pandemic-induced recession, and are people going to be giving multiple times to each campaign? Like it to some degree, it creates kind of a fundraising headache.
Right. And as we've talked about before on the podcast, I mean, ideally, Mayor Nuremberg would have loved to have had the Pre-K for SA vote in May. He would have liked to have had a public transit proposition on the ballot in November. And the pandemic changed everything. It pushed the Pre-K vote back to November, and it made the mayor recalibrate, decide he wanted to do workforce development. So it has become a much more complex situation. The messaging strategy is more difficult, but this is just the circumstance that I think the mayor found himself in, and so we're gonna see what's gonna happen with that. Wanted to talk a little bit about the ongoing situation with the Black Lives Matter movement. We've seen protests across the country in recent months, and the movement against police brutality and for police reform intensified over the past week. In Kenosha, Wisconsin, we saw the shooting of Jacob Blake, a 29-year-old African-American. He was shot in the back 7 times by a police officer. We've seen protests over that. The NBA players in the playoff bubble temporarily decided that they didn't want to keep playing because I think there was a feeling that continuing to play basketball and entertaining people at a time of this seriousness was just something they didn't want to do. They've since returned, but this is an issue that has really commanded national attention over the last few months. But I think the last week we saw definitely an intensification of that. And Brian, you wrote about a case here in San Antonio involving a man named Damian Lamar Daniels, and this was an incident involving he's a military veteran, and this was an incident involving him and sheriff's deputies. What exactly happened here?
So, Daniels was a military veteran. He was black, and he was apparently in a lot of mental distress over a 24-hour period where his relatives and even he were calling law enforcement out to his home. And, there were four separate, there were definitely 4 calls. And on the 4th call, which was just last Tuesday, sheriff's patrol deputies, 3 of them responded to his home. And after 30 minutes of trying to talk to Daniels, a struggle ensued. He was armed. Daniels was armed. He had a gun under his shirt. And the sheriff's deputies decided that they needed to take him in to detain him, even though it's important to note that there was no order by a judge to detain him. He wasn't being officially committed, but they decided for his own safety and for the safety of others to bring him in. But when that escalated into an attempt to detain him, that escalated to his death, because he struggled. Mm-hmm. And what Bexar County Sheriff Javier Salazar described it as he was reaching for the deputies' tasers. Mm-hmm. Daniels himself was tased a few times, mm-hmm. And it didn't have the effect that the deputies hoped it would have. And after some struggle, one of the deputies shot him twice and killed him. And so the story that I wrote with reporter Jacob Beltran, I thought it was one thing that stuck out was that Bexar County Judge Nelson Wolf was quite upset by the incident and thought that it could have been handled differently. And whereas Sheriff Salazar did not think that those deputies could have done anything different. And that's kind of what was the crux of the story. And it's important to note that Wolf came out with a statement saying this shows the need for the use of more mental health professionals in law enforcement instead of just sending armed deputies out to the home of someone who's in mental distress. One thing that that statement didn't really make too clear was that the sheriff's office already has access to mental health professionals in some form or fashion. They can activate clinicians from the Center for Healthcare Services to make calls. They actually have a mental health unit of Bexar County deputies who they're also armed, but they're specially trained to interact with people who are in mental distress.
Well, see, that's a really interesting point because I, in some of the responses, the comments and things like that to the story that you worked on, you had some people saying, questioning, well, if you sent, unarmed mental health experts and this person was armed and things escalated, then they would have been defenseless. But what you're describing wouldn't have been, that's not the situation at all. You could have had people who were, really trained and knowledgeable about how to deal with these kind of mental health cases, but they would have had the ability to defend themselves if necessary. Right.
Right. And Salazar. So when I brought this up to Salazar on Friday, I said, why didn't you activate that unit? And his response was, well, I don't think they would have handled it any differently than the patrol deputies handled it. And so my question is then, what is the point of having a mental health unit? If it seems like this is a textbook scenario where you would activate those people because they had advance notice that this man was in mental distress. Again, over a 24-hour period, there were 4 separate calls. So this wasn't a surprise that he was having some sort of episode, mental breakdown.
And it sounds like people were more concerned than anything else about him, about his welfare. I don't know that there was, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but I don't know that there was a sense that he was going to be a threat to anybody else, but there was more just a threat about his own health. Is that right?
I didn't see any evidence that he was threatening anyone else. No.
Right. And we have to say this is happening against the political backdrop of an election, and Sheriff Javier Salazar is facing re-election. And I think one of the things that's interesting is that, he's the Democratic candidate in the race, and we tend to look at issues of law enforcement reform as one that kind of breaks down along party lines, that Democratic candidates maybe are more receptive to that idea. And maybe there's more, we tend to hear more of the law and order message from Republicans and less, maybe less of a willingness to support reform measures. But in this case, we've got the Republican candidate, Jerry Rickoff, the former county clerk, making an issue of this and saying that it should have been handled by mental health people, and that it should have never escalated to this point. So it's an interesting situation where you have a Democratic sheriff defending an action that many people are looking at as an example of misconduct or just a poorly handled use of law enforcement, and you've got the Republican criticizing that. So.
Right. And it's interesting Jerry has kind of bucked his party's conventional wisdom in the past, if you remember his support for same-sex marriage.
Right.
He's an unconventional Republican, I think.
That's right.
And I think it's interesting that you have somebody like Sheriff Salazar who, over the course of the pandemic has spoken a lot about maybe we incarcerate too many people. Maybe they're think back over the course of the pandemic when outbreaks in the jail were a bigger problem and more prominent in the news. And that kind of led him to, take a more perhaps progressive stance and, say, hey, look, not everybody in this jail who is, nonviolent needs to be here. And maybe this should, be this way even when there isn't a pandemic. And it's just interesting to see kind of somebody who does actually kind of position themselves as somewhat of a progressive on criminal justice issues kind of be forced back into sort of this position where he's kind of having to defend something that is a likely outcome.
Well, I mean, he's
under the just the way that these things are structured and the way that they're set up.
He's defending his own officers,
right?
But that's I think right. I noted this in the story. He won't release the body cam footage, which I think that's a problem. I mean, someone died.
It is a problem, and I think that Brian, your point is a good one. That you can have people who come into these positions with a certain maybe ideological stances, but then they get in that position where they're actually running the office, and sometimes they're determination to defend their officers or to stick up for the decisions that were made there. Sometimes that will trump whatever their ideological stance might have been coming into office. So anyway, it's something we're going to be following as we go forward. Before we wrap things up, I wanted to talk a little bit about the two national political conventions. We had the Democratic National Convention 2 weeks ago, the Republican National Convention last week. Both of them were primarily virtual conventions because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Joe Biden, in his Democratic acceptance speech, delivered it basically to an empty room, and it was a low-key, kind of a very almost the speech that you would have an incumbent president make to the nation in trying to talk about how they're going to get through a crisis. The Republican Party used some of the speeches, the primetime speeches. They used the White House as a backdrop for Melania Trump, the First Lady's speech. Ivanka Trump, the president's daughter, made a speech on Thursday night. on the South Lawn of the White House. And then, of course, the big acceptance speech from President Trump was on the South Lawn. He had 1,500 people or so there sitting close to each other, very few of them wearing masks. He had a big fireworks display at the end of it with Trump 2020 spelled out. One of the questions that I have, and I don't really know the answer to this, is I think there are people who will watch or watched the final night of the Republican convention and saw the majesty of the White House behind the president and saw the pageantry of the whole event and might come away impressed by that or swept up in that. And there were, I think, others who were going to just be kind of disgusted or think it was really tacky to use the White House in that way for a political speech. And I guess I would interested in your thoughts on how you think this is going to play out, whether the overall effect will be that it will turn off people or whether it will be in some way beneficial and remind people that this guy's the president.
Gilbert, could you know if any other American president has ever utilized so many American flags at once?
That is, I wish, that it would be great to take account of that. I know on as far as the acceptance speeches from the White House, because there's been a lot of people have looked back at this. There's only one instance that I'm aware of in which a president has made an acceptance speech from the White House, and that was Franklin Roosevelt in 1940. But it was a radio address, so obviously he wasn't using the White House as a visual prop. He and his situation was somewhat unique because he was running for a third term. He didn't want to look like he was seeking it because this had never been done before. So he wanted the party to sort of draft him, and which they did. And I think because of that situation, Europe was at war and so on. He just decided, I'm going to do it from the White House rather than going and making it, playing up the political angle and doing it at a convention with a cheering crowd. He did it as a kind of a radio address from the White House. But we've really never seen anything like this where the White House has been used in this way. So we don't really know how people are going to respond to that.
Yeah, and I hate to be the guy who says, like, I don't know if people really care about these things, but I mean, it's and a lot of this is sort of the musings of sort of political reporters and sort of insiders and all that. But there are laws about doing this sort of thing, and it really, like, if there is a law violation here, should somebody prosecute it? I mean, this sort of thing only holds up if somebody actually enforces it, and if you don't, it's not a norm that we're talking about here. It's a law. So right. If we're gonna make hay about this, then either somebody needs to actually prosecute the law, or it doesn't mean anything, and it just becomes another thing that's sort of by the wayside.
And I think with regard to the law, I mean, one of the things that got a lot of attention last week was the fact that you had the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, delivering a political speech in favor of President Trump at the convention. He did it remotely from Jerusalem. And you had San Antonio Congressman Joaquin Castro was one of the political officials who spoke out about this and said this was clearly a violation of the Hatch Act. We have not had secretaries of state making political convention speeches in the past. So, I mean, one of the problems is that the Hatch Act is basically a toothless law, and you can get reprimanded over it. Former San Antonio Mayor Julian Castro, when he was HUD secretary, got reprimanded because he was asked who he favored in the 2016 Democratic primary, and he said Hillary Clinton, and he got reprimanded for that. But which seems kind of minor compared to what Pompeo did last week. But even in that case with Castro, there's really not much. It's just basically telling people you shouldn't do it, and so I think that's a big question.
Yeah, and Kellyanne Conway ran into this pretty early on in the Trump presidency. The Office of Special Counsel, found that she violated the Hatch Act on numerous occasions, but like she didn't face any any real reprimand for that. I mean, I believe they recommended that she be fired, and that didn't. And that didn't happen. Actually, that was last year that happened, which tells you something about how time works now. But and then I also think about, you also have like sort of this weaponization of like aspects of the presidency that you can that being deployed outside of whether there's like a specific Hatch Act violation. Mm-hmm. You had the naturalization ceremony. Right. I believe it was 5 people who are naturalized. They did not realize that they were going to be
on live TV
on live TV, or as part of the Republican National Convention. So I mean, it's just like using that as sort of like campaign pageantry as. I'm not sure how much precedent there is for that.
Yeah, no, I think it's something we haven't seen before, and with throughout the Trump presidency, we've seen him sort of just trample over norms. But this is something he's chosen to do, and we're gonna find out, I guess, in the coming weeks, how people respond to that. But he's kind of at the same time, he's trying to tout his achievements and talking about particularly how well the economy was doing pre-COVID-19, while at the same time sort of running as a challenger in a way, saying in Joe Biden's America, you're going to have the kind of violence in the streets that we're having right now in Donald Trump's America. And it's a real interesting trick that he's trying to pull off here, which is to be the incumbent when it comes to touting a record of achievement, but playing the challenger when it comes to distancing himself from anything that he doesn't like that's going on in the country.
Yeah, and he's just kind of having to twist himself into that knot. The other thing that I think about is also kind of like his posturing, the other sort of track that he's posturing against Biden, not just the sort of in Biden's America, you're going to be, there's going to be all of this looting and unrest. But the other thing is that like he had sort of 2 lines of attack that he kind of coalesced into something that I'll be curious to see if it'll work. There was this idea that, Joe Biden is, this sort of doddering old fool, that he's just kind of like sort of weak and he's old. And then you have this idea that Biden is, this sort of like, secret radical that he's
criminal,
that's
criminal mastermind who's able to launch a legion of criminals across the suburb.
Like that he's basically just like, a Bernie Sanders, which is, or
he's a Trojan horse for AOC or something like that. Yeah.
But like now they've kind of coalesced that into sort of one message, which is like that, like Biden is a doddering old fool who will be unable to stop basically the waves of radical, sort of policies that you would maybe see under like an AOC or a Sanders, radical to, Republicans. Yeah. I'll be very curious to see if that works out. I feel like those 2 things, together, the idea of him as sort of like a Trojan horse, and also one where violence is going to be rampant, is those 2 kind of don't go together to some degree, and I'm curious to see like whether people will square that. But I mean, look, like who hasn't decided at this point?
I was just going to say, I mean,
great point.
That's my thought. I mean, it seems like the pandemic situation probably would have crystallized their people's choice and up to now. What's going on in Portland seems unlikely to sway someone who's been living through this pandemic, but I could be wrong.
I think that it's almost like they're fighting over maybe like 5% of the electorate at this point, and also just trying to sort of energize their voters to it becomes a turnout battle, but and they're basically fighting to sway people on the margins. But it does remind me a little bit of the way Obama in his early years as president would hear criticism from Republicans. You would simultaneously hear that he was kind of this sort of dithering, indecisive guy, and that also that he was a wild-eyed communist who was trying to destroy, the free enterprise system. And I thought, like, he's one or the other, maybe, but I don't know if he could be both of those things at the same time. But
And at the same time, you've got, I mean, this is all kind of papering over the fact that like Trump, like the Republicans deliberately decided not to have a platform this time around. Basically, like what they did was sort of re-up the 2016 platform with sort of a dash of like, you know, whatever Trump's having, we'll have too. That's basically the sort of thing. And like
the When Harry Met Sally platform, basically.
Yeah, it really is that. You know, in all seriousness, you know, and they also dinged the Democrats for not really talking too much policy in their convention, which, you know, that was seemingly a legit knock on them. You know, Democrats spent a lot more time trying to basically be like, Joe Biden, good guy. You like him, right?
Yeah.
Like that's kind of like that was sort of the whole crux of that convention. And, you know, also sort of like, you know, very, very eager to sort of bring on, you know, disaffected Republicans and, you know, independents that were not very like, you know, who are not very chill with Trump.
Well, you know, the thing is that I think there were about 16% of Obama 2012 voters who either did not vote at all in 2016 or voted for Donald Trump. I think it was something like maybe 9% stayed home and 7% voted for Trump. And so that's, you know, that's what they're kind of fighting over here. We're basically seeing a fight over the Obama Trump voters, and Democrats are trying to win them back, and Republicans are worried that they're losing them and trying to hang on to them. And so, I mean, it's kind of work. Yeah.
And I want to say, like, watching the DNC, like, it struck me, you know, obviously, like, you can't have the sort of convention that Obama had in 2008, but it felt very much like the Obama campaign in aesthetics. Like, you had, like, you know, covers of Stand By Me. You had, no, I'm serious. Like, it's like, it felt like somehow very deliberate. Like what was like, you know, Bruce Springsteen, like the Rising, which was, right. I believe that was the campaign anthem in 2008. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean,
it was one of the songs that they played a lot. Yeah.
But I mean, like they were playing that, you know, constantly throughout this convention. And, you know, it was, you know, like something I felt went unremarked on was that, you know, he was basically trying to sort of cast out these kind of Obama vibes to a degree.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, what struck me about the Republican National Convention was some cognitive dissonance. You had a lot of protests from Trump supporters going on saying this guy's not racist. You know, these speakers going on saying Trump is not racist. But then you have that couple who pulled the guns on the Black Lives Matter protesters, right, talking about low income housing like coming into your neighborhoods, which is, I mean,
well, yeah, and it's right, and you know, along those lines, I mean, they were simultaneously attacking Biden for his role in the early '90s crime bill, which imposed really, you know, tough draconian sentences and resulted in a lot of young African-American men being incarcerated. So they attacked him for that and saying that he's been really bad to the African-American community because of that. But at the same time, they were also putting out the message that in Joe Biden's America, Black Lives Matter protesters are going to run wild in the streets. You know, so to me, it feels like there are contradictory messages going on there. But I think that I think there's some thought that maybe if we just kind of throw a lot of things at the wall, that maybe, you know, something's going to stick here. So I don't know. I guess we'll wrap things up there. Thank you all so much for listening, and we hope everybody's doing well, and we'll catch up with you next week. Take care.